Recently, I took on my most challenging yet fun production project yet. There's a company called Teenage Engineering, and they sell a synth called the OP1. Just like Ableton Live, it's a digital audio workstation. Last month, they held a beat contest where the winner could receive a free OP1. I wanted to enter and try something special. My idea was to try and build some Ableton devices inspired by the OP1. After 2 days, I don't know what happened, but I landed on making my own DAW inside Ableton. It's a DAW inside a DAW. And I've called it the writer's block, because you can't be an artist without it. It's basically a karaoke toy for producers. You have all the fun of making little ideas without the pressures of making it perfect. Similarly to how I described the OP1, the writer's block has its own set of unique sounds and workflow. I designed all the instruments, samples, and effects from the ground up, and the best part is, you can save them as presets and use them outside of the writer's block in your own project files. If you have Live 10 or 11 Suite and you want to follow along with this tutorial, you can download the writer's block right now on my Gumroad for $10. The link is in the description. If you want to support further, you can pay what you want on top of that price. So let's get into it. This is the writer's block, and the first thing I want to point out is the menu. If you're in Live 11, you'll notice you have a little plus and minus button on the left of the rack. This lets you collapse and expand the menu. This isn't available in Live 10, but I made sure that both versions have the same essential menu. 4 controls on the top and 4 controls on the bottom. Step 1, turning on the loopers. Woo! Step 1, turning on the... Step 1 is turning on the loopers, which you only have to do when you're starting. To show you what I mean, this is one of the loopers called the capture looper. This is where all of your recorded takes go. All I need to do is make sure Ableton is playing, and then flick the capture reset forward and back. And it's on, that simple. We're going to do the same thing for the storage looper, which is where we save all the loops we don't want to accidentally write over. I go to the storage reset and flick it forward and back. Now it's up and running and we're ready to go. When you do this, you don't have to actually open up the loopers. I just wanted to show you what's happening inside. You can keep everything closed and the reset still works. To make it easy for you to use this thing, I'm going to show you the cycle I go through in my head. First, I choose an instrument. Then when I'm ready, I record my loop. If I like my loop, I save it to the storage, and at the very end of that loop, I reset the capture and start over. Step 2, choose an instrument. Step 2, choose an instrument. Step 2, to choose an instrument, use the sound selector. Whatever you land on will be highlighted, and that's where your MIDI's going to. If you're not getting the same scroll effect you're seeing on screen, make sure this little yellow arrow is on. Ableton calls this the auto select, and this is what's responsible for the menu snapping. When it's off, the menus don't jump around. And when it's on, they do. To start, I'm going to go with the duosphere instrument. And now I need some time to figure out what to play. I don't want to be recording yet. To double check this, I can make sure that my sound's coming out of the chain called not recording. I'm ready to record my loop, so I'm going to switch the capture to on. I've set up the loopers to record for 4 bars. To make that visually easy to understand, I've set up this loop bracket that's also 4 bars. If you record within these, your song will perfectly loop. Now I'm going to turn on the metronome, check once more that my capture is set to on, and record. You'll also see the sound switch from the not recording to the capture loop. And that's my first loop. Since I'm done recording, I'm going to switch the capture back to off. This way, if I accidentally hit some notes, it'll only play in the not recording tab and leave the captured loop alone. You might be wondering at this point, Chuck, you're telling me about this capture looper and then there's going to be a storage looper. Why are there 2? Why isn't one looper good enough? I can show you why right now. I have some really pretty chords going on in the capture looper, and I'm going to record some drums directly on top of them. That sounds pretty bad, and unfortunately, that's recorded on top of my good take. The only thing we can do is delete it all and start over. When this happened to me for the first time, I was like, dang, I wish there's a way I could save my good take. Maybe in a storage, perhaps. And that is why there's 2 loopers. So I'm gonna skip forward and re-record my loop so we can save it. We're back to square one. I have my first loop in the capture. This time, I wanna make sure it doesn't get ruined. So we're moving on to the storage. Step 3, it's the storage. Step 3, it's the storage. To save your loop, you use the storage switch. You switch it on at the very beginning of your loop, and you switch it off at the very end. As a visual guide, I'm gonna use this loop bracket to know when I should turn it on and off. And there you have it. I successfully transferred it from the capture to the storage. You might notice it just got louder. If you look down at the tabs, you can see both the capture and the storage are playing the same exact loop. Because the transfer was successful, we don't need to keep it in the capture loop anymore. All we need to do is reset the capture, and that is the entire recording cycle. Now I'm going to start recording some music in real time to show you how fluid the whole process is. In the lower left corner, I'm going to show you which step of the cycle I'm on and which control is responsible. This way you know how it looks at a normal speed. Hopefully, if you're using this thing and you get stuck in the recording process, you can come back to this and see what I did. The last essential part of the menu is the effects. What we doing? Effects. What we using? Effects. What we doing? Effects. What we using? So I pull up. Oh wait, okay. I'm sorry. So to go to the FX menu, you can either click on it directly or you can use the sound selector. It's the very last one. Earlier, we talked about the menu snapping, which happens when this little yellow arrow is on. Whenever you're about to use the effects menu, I suggest turning it off. For example, right now I have the drum selected. No matter which menu I'm on, if I play a drum sound, it's gonna snap right back to the instrument I'm playing. So if I wanna go to the effects menu and move the reverb while I'm playing drums, the second I hit a drum sound, it's gonna teleport me right back to the drum menu. But if you turn off the yellow arrow, You can be in the effects menu, play some drum sounds, and the menu snapping won't get in the way. As an extra reminder, I also added that information to the effects image. Make sure it's off when you're using effects, and make sure it's on when you're using instruments. Now that that's out of the way, the effects are pretty fun. There's reverb, there's a frequency shifter delay, there's one effect I made where I stacked 40 EQ3s and it kind of made like a lo-fi pitch wobbly filter. And then there's a delay specifically for turning your mono stuff into stereo stuff. When the effects is set to pre, that means I'm putting an effect on my sound before we record. Instead of it coming out of the not recording tab, it'll be coming out of the effects tab. When my FX is set to post, the effects will only be applied to things inside the capture loop, things that are already recorded. The nice thing about recording and saving loops in the writer's block is that you can chop the loops in real time by only recording sections. If I only switch on the capture for a little bit and then quickly turn it back off, I'll only record the parts I switched it on for. Thank you so much for watching this far. This is the end of the basics. Right now, I'm going to explain how to set up and use the radio module. I'll go over some extra tips, and then I'll wrap up by covering the advanced features in the Live 11 version. When you download the writer's block, it comes with two versions of the radio module. The Standalone is what we're going to start off with. This is the one you can use anywhere in Ableton. Every component is inside. Unfortunately, it crashes Ableton if we put this version into the writer's block. There's too many signal chains going on and it can't handle it. I was able to fix the problem by modifying the design to work inside the rack. Once we go through how to set up and use the Standalone, the modified version will make complete sense. The radio module is made up of two parts, the sampler and the radios. We're going to start in the sampler tab. The first thing you need to download is BeatLab's Instant Sampler. It's a free Max for Live device that lets you record a signal in real time and then immediately play it like a piano. To see where we're going to install it, click Show Devices on the radio, and then inside, click Show Macros. A new set of controls will pop up. Now it's as simple as dragging the sampler in. Next, we're going to map the sampler to the macros. Live 11 has more functions than Live 10, so I'm going to do this in the order of Live 10 controls first, then Live 11, so you can follow along. We're going to hit the map button and you'll see everything in the sampler as well as our knobs turn green. Map the giant recording button to the play/record macro. Map the start to the sample start macro. The buffer size is mapped to the record length. In the amp menu, the A and R are both mapped to the attack release macro. And this reverse button is mapped to the reverse macro. I forgot to record this part on screen, but you're going to map the glide to the pitch glide macro. We're going to turn off the mapping real quick to access the filter menu, turn it back on, and then map the cutoff to the filter macro. Turn off the mapping once more so we can get to the mod menu, turn it back on, and then map the sync rate to the LFO speed. We're going to map the shapes to the LFO shape, and then over here by the volume, map the LFO to the LFO. We're done with mapping, we can turn that off. And for the sampler input, choose the MIDI track that the radio module is on, and then in the second menu, choose radio/mic post effects. Now the sampler is set up. Next, we go to the radio/mic tab. For this step, you need to download Plugin Boutique's Radio VST. It's normally $30, but you can get a 10-day free trial, and sometimes it goes on sale. This VST plays one real-time station, and there's a shuffle button which will be super useful. I highly recommend researching copyright law for the sake of your own protection. In every tab that says radio, add an instance of the radio and hit the shuffle button. If you ever go to use the radio module and it sounds like the radios aren't on, hit the shuffle button and they'll find a new station to connect to. They're most likely offline. If you're in Live 11, the radio noise is internally generated thanks to the new bouncy notes. But that's not in Live 10, so I've set up an external audio file for the radio noise. To make sure it plays through, we have to go to every noise tab and make sure the compressors are set to listen to the radio noise. The sidechain and audition buttons should be on, yellow and blue. Lastly, go to the microphone and set it to listen to the radio mic. Whatever you set your audio input device to in the preferences is what this audio track is going to hear. And now you're hearing me inside the microphone of the radio module. Now that it's all set up, we're ready to use it. The first step is to make sure Ableton is playing, or the radio noise won't be heard. The main controls are the play record control and the seek/mic control. When we move the play rec to the right, the radio goes into listen mode. This is when you use the seek control to scrub through noise and stations to find something you want to sample. It should feel like a real radio in a sense. All the way to the right, you can access the microphone that we set up. Just like this. You can always click to the sampler tab to see what's being recorded. When you move the play rec control back to the left, the listening turns off and you can play whatever you've just recorded. Just a heads up, when you move the play record back to the right and it's back in listening mode, it's going to re-record over whatever the last sample was. The same thing goes for the control called record length. If you wiggle this and change the buffer size, it's going to reset the sampler. If you want to keep the sample, I suggest either turning on record while you experiment, or screen record in the background so you don't miss a thing. You can reverse, add a low pass filter, apply a volume LFO, as well as change how smooth the sample starts and ends. When auto chop is on, the sampler automatically scrubs through the recording. You can tap out a pattern and find some new rhythms. Like I said earlier, this version of the sampler makes Ableton crash. There's too many things inside. But the modified version is nearly identical. All I did is take out the radio mic tab and move it to its own MIDI track called Radio Backend. The entire module works the same. The sampler's listening to those radios and you can still scrub through them. So for this modified version, if we go back to that radio mic tab, you'll see that there's a compressor and an LFO. Make sure that the compressor is set to listen to the Radio Backend's post effects. Also double check that the sampler's input is doing the same. It should be set to the Radio Backend and then post effects. For the LFO in there, make sure the depth is all the way to the left, the offset is mapped to the seek/mic, and then make sure that the yellow map rectangle at the top is mapped to the chain selector in Radio Backend. And that's the radio module. Now that you have working versions of the radio with the external plugins that we just installed, feel free to save these. That way you don't have to reinstall them every time you open it back up. And now here's some extra tips for using the writer's block. At any time in Ableton, you can use the minus and plus buttons on your keyboard to expand and collapse the actual devices. This is helpful for when things like this pop up. You don't need to be using this. This is kind of like the inner workings, so you can just collapse it and then use the effects. If you change the BPM of the project file, you'll actually change the pitch and speed of all the loopers. You can even do this while you're recording to get some pitch wobble or some microtonal stuff going on in your loop. The drums start on middle C or C3. So if you're trying to play the drums and you're not hearing anything, make sure you're playing in the right octave. In Live 10, you only have one storage looper, but in Live 11, you have two, storage A and storage B. You can just use storage A the same way that Live 10 only uses one looper. This is just an extra way to get some fun out of the writer's block. If you expand your menu, you'll see the reset for storage B, which works exactly like the other resets. Turn it on when you're starting up the loopers, and use it to erase any recordings. There's also a new control called storage A cross B. It's a crossfader. This lets you choose which storage you're going to record to. All the way to the left, and you'll only hear and record to side A. All the way to the right, you'll only hear and record to side B. And then moving the crossfader to the middle lets you hear both side A and B. Keep in mind the middle is only for listening, not for recording. This gives you the ability to record two different parts of a song and flick between both. Or you can organize your loops, only saving your drums to storage A and then only saving your chords to storage B. If you expand the menu a bit further, you'll see these controls called A to B transfer and B to A transfer. This just means if you have audio playing on one side, you can flick this knob and transfer it to the other. For example, if I have chords playing on A and I want to chop them up, I can use the transfer controls to play a little pattern, which will get recorded to the other side. The export control is something I added for fun. You don't actually need to use it. Basically, if you hit record in Ableton, you can use this lever to control the volume of the export. If you want to switch it back to normal, just head to the audio track called export and change the audio input to the writer's block. Now when you hit record, it works normally. The last two options called Capture Pan and Effects Pan are just that. You can change the panning of them while you're recording. If you don't know what sidechaining is, it sounds like this. My voice was just sidechained to the kick. So if I have chords on side A, and I want to sidechain that to the kick on side B, I'll use the A to B sidechain. Lower the threshold, play with the release time, and I'll get that same exact pumping effect. I've been working on this whole thing for a month straight, so I'm so excited to share this with you, and I can't wait to see what y'all do. Tag me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and I'll be sure to check it out. Have fun!